Well, we're going to jump into our continued roll through each WCC team and start the season previews. And next up is the St. Mary's Gaels, the two-time defending, or I guess three-time, depending on how you want to do it, WCC regular season champions. The St. Mary's team went 17-1 in WCC play last year. They were a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament. Second round team, beating VC. I'm blanking on
Vandy. Come on, Vandy.
Whoa, like the other team that wears black
and starts with a V.
They were the same colors. That's why it threw me off. Of like they've seen VCU twice, Vandy. Were like, no, they good chance they see Vandy again in the Battle for Atlantis this year. So we'll see how that goes. But the St. Mary squad reaches the second round. That's kind of been where they've been. That's been the ceiling the last 5 or so years for a team that has been to the NCAA tournament 4 straight years. This is kind of been a period of unprecedented success for the St. Mary's program. You think about where like all the veteran experience, all the guys who've had rolled through, whether it be the Tommy Kuzis, the Logan Johnsons, the Augustus Marshallonis, the Mitchell Saxons, like Alex Dukas, about a lot of really good players roll through this window. And now we're in a situation where St. Mary's is going to look very different. They have all of one senior on this team, and they only return one starter from this team. This is going to be a very different look for St. Mary's. They don't have a true point guard. They don't have the veteran leadership we're used to seeing. But we're actually still feeling pretty good about the talent level and what this team is capable of doing. And maybe it is as simple as in Randy Bennett we trust, but the St. Mary's squad, despite some of the challenges that they've had, you look at up and down this roster, Mikey Lewis, Paulius, Murauskas, Harry Wessels, you have a lot of new pieces jumping in. This is still a really good St. Mary's team, and probably, I mean, we're going to get here eventually, is still going to be in the conversation to win the WCC.
Yeah, I think to start with, you definitely know that even with all these questions that we're about to raise, it's not the blind leading the blind. We know Randy Bennett. We know who he is. We know what he's about. And we know what he's going to bring to the table on a year-over-year basis. You mentioned the roster construction. It does give me some pause. I can't lie to you, Zach. Mary's teams, they're very smart, they're very disciplined. Look, they make the right plays at the right time. Kuzi, Logan Johnson, Marshallonis, you mentioned all of them. Is it just going to be forcing Tony Duckett into that peg? Is it going to be Mikey Lewis taking on the burden there? Is Josh Dent? I've heard that name get thrown around quite a lot, but he hasn't played that much. So all of that comes together, and you look at how crucial a point guard is in Randy Bennett's offensive system, and you kind of saw how when teams started trapping Goose last year, how kind of helpless it got at times. Like that is an area where it's gives me pause on paper, but not in terms of the pest defender. So the Kyle Bowens now into Luke Barrett. Now Luke Barrett's gone. Who's going to be the next pest defender? The one that just pisses every opposing offense off. That's the one thing I think they're also going to have to kind of wait and see. Maybe it's Paulius Murauskas, but Murauskas has such a bigger responsibility that I don't know if that's exactly the role for him, considering what he already brings to the table. So I think when you look at St. Mary's, I think there's a lot more questions than in years past, but I do think they have the right architect to figure it out because they've answered those types of questions in the past. I do think that there's obviously a possibility we get some emerging stars that rise to the occasion. And I think you think of other guys like who redshirted last year, Liam Campbell, that maybe he steps up. Is freshman Trent McLean ready? Is Andrew McKeever ready? Does he back up Harry Wessels? How do the two guys get along? Do they run double big once again at a certain point? So I think that you have the right guy in terms of trying to find the solutions. I just don't know. There's a lot more unknown, I think, with St. Mary's this year compared to the last 2 years in quite some time, quite honestly.
And the unknowns, I think, are completely fair because there is a lot. There's even a lot, even with the returners that you think about, the Paulius Murauskas or even a Mikey Lewis coming back, that we know you can clearly see like the potential upside and where Mikey Lewis could go. But with so many unknowns early on, defenses are probably going to change and really focusing on him, taking away him as a three-point shooter. And because this was the St. Mary's squad, if you look at things they did not do well a year ago, or over the last couple of years, they haven't shot the three well. And I don't know if they've necessarily addressed that concern. You looked at their just the shooting percentage as a team. Like, this was not a good 3-point shooting team a year ago. This was a team that I think like had number here. They shot 31.9% as a team, which was 9th in the WCC. Now, the one thing that was actually of benefit to an extent, addition by subtraction on the 3-point shooting front, that Luke Barrett and Jordan Ross shot a combined 28% from three. So you at least did remove two of your worst 3-point shooters. However, that was, obviously there's a lot that both of those brought. So I'm not saying like it's addition by subtraction overall, but in a specific 3-point shooting sense, they hopefully are going to be a little bit better. You add a Tony Duckett, that should help their 3-point shooting. Hopefully Murauskas has gotten a little bit better himself. But you look at some of the additions that they've also, again, kind of the additions by just going to see a lot of good things out of Liam Campbell. He is supposed to bring that shooting. One guy that just from notes I've started to hear that is going to, one, he's healthy, so I think this is a big part of it, is Rory Hawk. And he has been basically banged up the last couple of years, but there is a lot of good energy and feelings that he could be the guy who slides in as the 3 on this team. I do think there's going to be a little bit of competition on that front, because that's one position that seems at least less solidified than everywhere else. Like, I can point to Josh Dent, Tony Duckett, Mikey Lewis, Liam Campbell. Okay, there's my backcourt. But my 3 is a Dylan Shaw. Is it going to be Rory Hawk? How much are we going to see it be maybe even one of the newcomers, that being Mantis Juzenis coming over from Lithuania? Like, there's a few options kind of at every spot for the St. Mary's squad, that you kind of have a lot of these unknowns there. I think because really, to me, like, there's 3 set in stone, and it's Mikey Lewis, Murauskas, and Wessels. Those are like the only 3 I can say like for sure are going to be in those starting roles. And Harry Wessels, this is someone who I think has just been kind of biding his time for an opportunity. He has sat behind Mitchell Saxon the last 3 years, and he's gotten to learn from one of the best defenders in the WCC, one of St. Mary's best defenders ever, if not the best, depending on how you want to judge that. But Wessels is now going to get the opportunity to be the guy down low, and he still has a lot to learn. We've still seen him make some of those younger big man mistakes even last season. But when you think about the moments he had, like, this was the guy who actually was able to shut down Graham Ike. No one shuts down Graham Ike. Harry Wessel just creates an absolute wall in front of him. And we're going to see that a little bit more this year, obviously, because Ike's back, Wessels is back. And you mentioned the double big. I think we're still going to see that, because Andrew McKeever brings that still to what St. Mary's is able to do. Last year, we saw them using it with Wessels and Saxon. I don't think there's any reason they can't do the same with Wessels and McKeever. And that does bring up something I did want to show and point out, because St. Mary's released the team photo the other day. And for those who cannot see, if you are listening to it, go on to St. Mary's social, look at the website, wherever, and find the team photo, because in this photo, you can see the back line, Harry Wessels, Andrew McKeever, and then Jazz Gardner. Wessels is listed at 7'1". Gardner's listed at 7 foot. McKeever's also listed at 7'1". That is not someone who is 7'1". There is a clear 2-3 inch difference between McKeever and the other 2. So you talk about size. This St. Mary's team, we know it has it. We know they've utilized it. I'm still very high on this team overall. I know in the last episode I was talking about the schedule and how I'm cringing a little bit about the lack of opportunities that there are. But when I stare at this team and I stare at what they have, are there question marks? Sure. But I get the feeling this team's going to figure it out before we get to the middle of December.
I mean, they get the benefit of the doubt. I don't think you can do anything but give them the benefit of the doubt, given what they've put out the last few years. You mentioned all the conference championship, conference tournament champions, eventually making their way to the second round of the NCAA tournament consistently. There's no reason to assume that St. Mary's won't find a way to turn the corner. I just think when you mentioned like those initial questions that you have, I just think there are more this year compared to you've seen in quite some time compared to it. So you mentioned the three, and I mentioned like who's going to be the pest to replace Luke Barrett, who replaces Kyle Bowen. You think just kind of how that kind of shuffles down. Who can be the two-way guy for Alex Dukas? Because I think Paulius Murauskas is going to be a guy who the responsibility could be on him kind of just to make things happen. So I don't think when you look at a guy like, I don't think an Alex Dukas, Paulius Murauskas is a one-to-one, and not even a Kyle Bowen. Luke Barrett is a one-to-one to what Murauskas is going to bring to the table. So I want to kind of see how people kind of coalesce and embrace the opportunity that's coming their way, because I think the one thing you last year, can he stop fouling? Like he's got to be on the floor. And yes, Andrew McKeever may be very capable behind him, but that's not a scenario you want to adventure too far into too often. So like for me, it's a bunch of the little things for me about St. Mary's. Can some guys step up to the plate who we don't know about? Can some guys who maybe we know a little bit about do more? And can the newcomers find a way to be those guys in a Randy Bennett system, a la Tony Duckett? So for me, there's just a lot more small things that I kind of want to wait and see play out before I make a final determination on St. Mary's. But I think you can't argue the fact that they obviously will be in contention for another conference championship. I think inarguably that they'll be in contention for another NCAA tournament. I do think that there's a lot more pause with the schedule, as you mentioned earlier. But I do think they'll find a way to turn the corner. But I do think it may be a little bit more of a bumpy road than people expect. And there's definitely a lot more pieces that haven't been settled in terms of not only how they make up a unit person for Randy Bennett and his squad this year.
I think that's the other interesting note of like there's a lot. I feel like we do this in a good number of years with both Randy Bennett and Mark Few teams, where you look at the rosters like, oh, these teams are like 9, 10, 11 deep. Neither of these coaches are going to play more than like 7, 8 dudes when we get to March. Like there's a clear-cut line on how many guys will actually play significant minutes for these teams, at least by the end. Yeah, we'll probably see some mix and match early on in November and December as they start to figure these teams out. But we know by the time we get to March, that rotation is going to be real small. So who is in that rotation come it's time for the WCC tournament, time for March Madness, is going to be, I think, very different than what we see right now. I mean, I keep going back, keep thinking about this team because because of the question marks, and the point guard is the one that I'm left kind of thinking about the most, because we haven't seen enough of Josh Dent to know if he's going to be the guy who can step in on a regular basis. I don't know if Tony Duckett's going to be that either. I don't know if we're going to see more of Cade Bennett at that spot because of we don't have another true point guard. But the other thing that popped in my head was they may not have a true point guard, but they also didn't have a true point guard when Jordan Ford ran the show. And that is someone who I can more solidly make the case. You know who looks like that? Mikey Lewis. That is maybe the direction you go in an era where you don't have the quote unquote point guard. And yes, like Jordan Ford did have he had Tommy Kuzi next to him for a while. He had Joe Rayhan by his side for a little moment there as well. So it's not like he never had a point guard next to him, but he was the primary. He was the one who ran the show in those last couple of years for St. Mary's. And he wasn't a true point guard. He was a score first point guard. Could he distribute? Yes. But that wasn't what his main goal was. I mean, this is a guy who, had they actually played the NCAA tournament that year, would have become St. Mary's all-time leading scorer. And he was the point guard. So I think that we could see maybe that style play into the season when you don't have a true one, which we're used to with Randy Bennett's system.
Yeah, I think you kind of saw a little bit of a teaser when Mikey Lewis would take some of the point guard duties over at the WCC tournament and maybe sprinkle it in over the course of the last regular season. You didn't see it a lot, but I think you kind of saw maybe, I don't want to say a trial run, so to speak. I think that was just more out of necessity in terms of what the game was giving them. But when you think of, he's a lankier guy. He's someone who maybe would have a bigger reach in terms of his dribble and trying to get to the basket. How can he find a way to continue to build on maybe not having the ball stripped on like the weak side for example, like that. I'm not saying that's a problem that he will have. I'm just saying in terms of what his makeup is, what the build is, what guys will be doing when they come to crash. Guys are going to be looking for him. It's not going to be, well, we don't really know what we have here and trying to see Mikey Lewis create. Okay, they're going to see that to have more ample opportunity. He's going to be a guy who is going to be decisive one day. Yes, I do see the vision. I do think there's probably a lot more practical roadblocks compared to what Jordan Ford-esque leaders running the show would be in terms of with Mikey Lewis. But I do think he's capable. I think that's inarguable. But I do think when I look at what St. Mary's is trying to do, and I guess kind of what the Gaels envision for what a smart point guard is, and kind of the way the point guard has manifested itself, and like at least maybe in this year's case, it may be more of a combo guard. There's a lot more processing that goes on at the point of attack, and I'm not so sure that this group has that yet. They may, and maybe down the line during the season, it just clicks. But when I look at it right now, I'm like, I don't know if there's a guy that's like Tommy Kuzi that can take stock of the floor. Someone like make the right decisions and make sure that the offense is running on schedule. I think there may be a lot more explosiveness at play with guys like Tony Duckett and Mikey Lewis, but I'd look at everything else from play to play. Maybe a little bit slower to start this season.
Well, they'll have plenty of time to kind of start it off slow, not slow, because they do have a really good schedule still kind of lined up in that first part of the non-conference. St. Thomas, Chattanooga, Ohio, South, North Texas. They started off in those first couple weeks. A lot of really solid teams, and then the WCC schedule came out just last week, so starting to stare at that a bit too. And there's always like one really tough stretch, like St. Mary's last year. Then we talked a lot about, there was an 8-game stretch where they basically played the entire top half of the league, and the big question was, how they were going to come out of that. I remember a lot of people say 4-4 out of those 8 games, and they ended up being 7-1, with the one being the 1-point loss at USF. So you think about the St. Mary, you look at St. Mary's this year, obviously, like time will tell as we start to get a better sense of who this team is. But 6-game stretch, I stared at January 10th to January 31st, Washington State at USF, at Santa Clara, home for Oregon State, then they hit the road for Portland, and then they do get a full week to get ready to play in Spokane against Gonzaga for the final WCC meeting between the two in Spokane. So obviously there's going to be a lot of emotion behind that one, but that 6-game stretch is going to, I think, be a very big telling sign of what we should see. We should think of St. Mary's as the rest of WCC play carries on.
You give Randy Bennett a week to prep for Gonzaga. Boy, oh boy, oh boy! That if I'm a Gaels fan, that entices me, and that is going to be it's going to be a hard stretch of games, those 6. But I think you look at last year, and you mentioned the proof concept with those 8 games. I do think the back-to-back at San Francisco, at Santa Clara, is going to be a difficult one to go 2-0. Again, very capable program to do so. We've seen obviously for years on end that I just think that's more or less what I'm trying to get across. They may go 2-0, but if they go 1-1, it's not the end of the world, and that they can continue to power on. I do think that little stretch towards the end of the season where they should still win all these games, to be quite honest. At Washington State, home against Santa Clara, home against Gonzaga, a pesky 3 games to end the season, and we know that's kind of where St. Mary's is somewhat at their best over the course of a year. So I don't anticipate them dropping many of those games, but they're 2 stretch where they do kind of have to bring, if not but very close to their A game to make sure that they're going to continue to talk about the non-conference schedule having an effect down the road.
Yeah, looking back, I did want to take a look because St. Mary's has the full week to prep for Gonzaga in that one. Gonzaga has the full week to prep for that game too, so that is going to be like true mano a mano, no excuses. You got the full week. Let's do this.
It's time to throw down. Like, you don't want to see Mark Few and Randy Bennett go at it at least a few more times before this is out. And by the way, I don't care who has to make this happen and what administrator has to sign off on this, but these two teams better be playing for you. You guys need, quote unquote, need each other, but you should want to be playing each other. Okay, this should be a bar fight game that you guys sign up for one time a year. Once this song and dance is over with.
We'll just do this. We'll just do the 6-year home and home, 3 at Spokane Arena and 3 at Oracle Arena.
Okay,
Oracle. Oh no, Chase Center. Go over to Chase Center.
No, you're going to Oracle. Okay, we've heard it here. St. Mary's fans, obviously, I've been told through the grapevine of what it's like to maybe what type of neutral site you guys get. Obviously, with USF trying to go to Chase. Zach Farmer has officially adopted you guys with Oracle Arena.
Technically, there is no Oracle Arena, so.
Well, it's Oracle to me, damn it.
But that, again, we'll see what happens with that matchup in the future. But that 2 more times, obviously, in conference play, the first one in Spokane, that one's going to be a lot of fun with both teams getting a full week of prep. So that's going to also kind of really heighten up the excitement, the buildup for that game.
Absolutely. You know what? You're going. I'm assuming you're going because it feels like it's destiny for you to be there.
So I've already picked out a few spots. We'll see how it goes. I need to make the final arrangements.
Okay.